Okay, a bit of an update of this long story that is going on since 2014. I have to say, I will just make a short summary because I guess that you already know. So we proposed our text in March 2014. Later in 2015 we received comments from the two other institutions. So the general approach was published in June 2015 and amendments from the Parliament were voted in October 2015. We had 18 trilogues to get to a political agreement. So we really beat any kind of record in the Commission because I guess that's the longest number of trilogues was like 12, but we reached 18 trilogues. And the political agreement was found at the end of June this year. Why such a long negotiation? Because you know very well that the initial position of the Commission, Parliament and the Council were quite far apart. Not only the three institutions, but also positions in the member states were quite far apart. So it's really, it was really a long way to get to a political agreement. Be waiting for the vote at the Council in October, November, and after that there will be the vote at the European Parliament. The next 2 years will be dedicated to the drafting of implementing and delegated acts, and we are confident that the regulation will enter into force in June 2020.
From the member state perspective, of course, the text is a compromise. Only I think as we have so many different players, then we have to accept the compromises, and we think that from our point of view the text is acceptable.
Coming now maybe to this side of the panel, because there were, if you talk about a trilogue, there are three parties, and the one probably you have followed all the 18 negotiations, so being most, let's say, the most knowledgeable person about everything that happened. Now, Martin, if you step back a little bit, you know, and see the whole process, and look also a bit into the future, now on this final line, I would like to ask you, among others, the question, well, first of all, you represent European people, you represent also as an organic farmer, organic farming, but also I would like to ask you then, what is the implication if finally we would not get to an agreement?
Das Hauptproblem der Kommissionsvorlage war tatsächlich, dass sich das sehr stark auf die Rückstandsfrage, also ökologische Ware bei Pestiziden fokussiert hat.
So the main problem of the draft from the Commission was that it was a strong focus on the residues of pesticides only.
Ich glaube, das ist ja auch im Vortrag deutlich geworden, ökologische Landwirtschaft ist viel mehr.
And I think this has also been, we saw in the presentation, that organic agriculture is much more than that.
Bei dem langen Verhandlungsprozess habe ich auch gemerkt, und viele, wie sehr sich das in den 28 Mitgliedsländern auseinanderentwickelt hat in den letzten Jahren, auch das Verständnis von ökologischen Landbau.
But in the negotiations, I also observed that the understanding of organic and the perception is quite different in all the different member states.
Das erklärt, glaube ich, auch, warum der Prozess so schwierig war, weil auch die Mitgliedsländer einen sehr unterschiedlichen Blick haben. Für die einen Mitgliedsländer war es ein Exportmodell, für die anderen haben mehr an ihre Bauern gedacht und für die anderen haben mehr an Konsumenten gedacht.
This also explains why the negotiations were so difficult, because some member states they were looking more at the export, some were more wanting to look at the farmers, and some were more focusing on the consumer side.
3 Jahre Verhandlungen, muss ich sagen, auch dank des Einflusses des Parlaments, glaube ich, dass wir vieles erreicht haben, verändert haben, auch in einem positiven Sinne, wo ich jetzt sagen kann, diese neue Ordnung hat einen Mehrwert, auch für den ökologischen Sektor.
So, but after 3 years of negotiations, I can now say that also with the influence of the European Parliament, that we have reached a draft that really has some additional value also for the organic movement.
Ich verstehe die Angst, die immer damit verbunden ist, wenn man eine neue Regulierung macht, die Unsicherheiten, auch wenn man einen gewohnten Pfad verlässt. Das gibt immer Unsicherheiten, aber ich glaube, das lässt sich mit der neuen Verordnung auch in die Praxis umsetzen.
I can understand that there is usually some fear and some insecurity if you do a new regulation, but I think with this new draft we can we have a good basis now to put things into implementation.
Das ist ein Kompromiss zwischen 3 Institutionen. Keine Institution ist voll zufrieden, ich auch nicht. Aber man muss eine Gesamtbilanz ziehen und der Verhandlungstext, der ist jetzt 600 Seiten stark, 600 Seiten. Deshalb, wir müssen über den ganzen Text reden und nicht einzelne Punkte.
It is clear that it's a compromise, that the draft is a compromise between 3 institutions, and each of them is not fully satisfied. But we have to see that we have a text which is 600 pages long, and we have to look at the full extent of the text.
How do you see that? Where do we stand? How do you look at the compromise?
It's not a secret that the compromise which is on the table is not what we have been dreaming of, what we have been asking for. And we do not see that much added value compared to the status quo. And it's no secret as well that the IFOAM is of the opinion that we could work with the existing regulation as well, and we could keep on working with the existing regulation. There is a regulation in force. Of course, it needs some improvement as well, and it could be improved. But it's not that we are somehow in a very tricky situation because we don't have any legal basis for the organic production. On the other hand, I don't hesitate to say and to agree that in the last more than 3 years, the proposal has significantly improved compared to what was the initial proposal, which was on the table in 2014, I think, in March. So this is the effort of the 3 institutions, I think. We very much acknowledge this. Finally, I have to say, from our point of view, this draft still needs improvement. In many cases, there are lots of inconsistencies in the draft.
Okay, thank you very much. So I see very much that we are on the finishing line, but we need also finishers in that, and we had also the ones that made the compromises, that made the big architecture, but you emphasize that the finisher are important now on this last mile. I made a little bit of looking back, where do we stand, what have we achieved, and so on. But I think in your speech, Nick, you went much beyond that, and looking actually also at the function of what can regulations do and what it cannot do, and where do you have the limits, and how do we, I think my main question which I have and which I want to get out of this plan is, how actually can we use this tool of a regulation best for organic development?
I think the regulation is necessary. I think a regulation in general is helpful, but it needs to be one that provides a baseline and a foundation on which we can build a lot of other activities, and it shouldn't attempt to cover every single issue because it would become too restrictive and intimidating and act as a block to development and innovation. So I think if we can continue to think that there is a lot more that the organic farmers and food businesses are trying to do, to encourage them in that process through other policy support mechanisms, through other communication mechanisms, to support the whole process of learning that is really important. And all of that can build on the foundation of the regulation, but the regulation doesn't try to do everything. I think that's the really important thing.
Each of us has a clear role to play. So we have one role, member states have another one, and each of us has several levels of actions in which we can act. So our role for the moment being is to give a clear framework where the organic sector can move. Member States has a role of supervising the implementation and the development of the organic sector. Of course, private private activities are more than welcome, and they are very active and they are very alive. I would say, of course, it depends on what kind of activities, and it's framed in the future regulation. I would like to remind that there are, besides the organic regulation, there are a lot of activities which are carried out. For example, don't forget the European innovation partnership, which is currently putting together research, commission and private stakeholders, and there was a meeting in June right on this topic, and it's really fruitful and it can bring new blood and new ideas to the sector. The Commission is engaged now also in a new communication on the food chain, and there also I know that it's a horizontal topic, but in which there's the will to strengthen the cooperation among farmers themselves horizontally and in the food supply chain. So let's not look at the regulation itself, but there is a lot of other policies or discussions going on in which private partnerships are more than welcome and more than wished, I would say.
Because organic is not only a European but a global system, and there is the question of how people recognize each other and how you trade with each other. And I know there is an initiative going on about plurilateral agreement, how you call it.
An idea of getting together the biggest players of the organic sector, the countries which are mostly into production and trade of organics, like US, Canada, the European Union, of course, Switzerland, Chile, Japan, and South Korea, and to get together and start to discuss a bit how to harmonize this spaghetti ball, as we used to call, of regulations and different standards. And this might be, we might accept certain standards from Switzerland, but which are not necessarily recognized by the US, and the other way around. So do we really want to focus and concentrate on something a bit more common to avoid burden for producers, to avoid burden for traders, and to easy trade of organic products?
On international, I would like to remind you the Codex Alimentarius, there is the IFOAM standards on international level. So where do you see actually the potential that Europe, with its regulation, collaborates actually with other regulators around the
Wir
world?
müssen darauf achten, dass wir faire Wettbewerbsregeln haben, und die haben wir in vielen Bereichen nicht.
I think we need to make sure that we have fair rules for competition, and at the moment we don't have them in some cases.
Wir europäischen Bauern produzieren ja halt nicht genügend ökologische Ware, und wir kriegen zum Beispiel viele Importe von ukrainischen Weizen. Und ich glaube, wir können den Anspruch erheben, dass diejenigen, die unter fast denselben Bedingungen das produzieren, auch dieselben Regeln einhalten.
Currently the European farmers are not producing enough organic, and we can import wheat from the Ukraine.
Das ist die auch dieselben Standards.
And we want to make sure that they also comply with the same standard.
Wir müssen aber differenzieren, und das war unser Anspruch in den Verhandlungen, dass von Ländern des globalen Südens, dass die oftmals nicht die Möglichkeiten haben, unter denselben Bedingungen zu produzieren.
But we have to differentiate, and we also have to be clear that some countries from the global south, they don't have the capability to produce under the same conditions.
Wir müssen halt sehen, dass diese Länder auch Standards entwickeln können, um erstmal etwas zu entwickeln, was unserem europäischen System ähnlich ist.
And we have to acknowledge that they also have to be able to develop standards themselves that are comparable or can be meet our European standards.
The first one is we need to really have a holistic approach on agriculture and on food and farming, and not a very isolated way of looking at organic as just a quality scheme. Organic is much more, and we don't move ahead if we narrow down organic to this quality scheme which fits into the regulation. But the rest then is missing. And the other thing is, basically, I think that we somehow need a set of measures to address all the challenges which I had in order to have a social, economic and ecological sound food and farming system. So the mindset, so to say, how to approach the issue, and the set of measures is really key to move ahead.
Thank you.
I really would like to see a situation where farmers and food businesses, the processors, traders and everyone can fully utilise their own creativity and innovative capacity to make agriculture more sustainable and to achieve their own objectives. With the organic market and the regulation available to them as a support for that process, that they should be free really to make the systems work as effectively as they can with their own creativity.
Yeah.